The city of Ravenshore had always been a battlefield, though not in the way most people imagined. It wasn't the kind of war fought with tanks and soldiers, but one waged in back rooms, courtrooms, and dark alleys. Corruption ran through its veins like a disease, infecting everyone from the lowest street thug to the highest-ranking officials. And for as long as he could remember, Zion Mercer had been caught in the middle of it. He had grown up on the south side of the city, in a neighborhood where people either learned to fight or became prey. His father, Darius Mercer, had been a community leader, a man who refused to bow to the forces that sought to keep their streets under control, not by law, but by fear. He had spoken out against the corruption, organized protests, and demanded justice. And then one night he had vanished. Zion had been only 10 years old when his father left the house and never returned. No body was ever found. No official investigation was conducted. The authorities dismissed it as a voluntary disappearance, but everyone in the neighborhood knew the truth. Darius Mercer had made too many enemies, and in a city like Ravenshore, that was a death sentence. His mother, Celeste, had done her best to shield him and his younger sister, Imani, from the harsh realities of their world. She worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, always telling them that their father would have wanted them to rise above the violence, not be consumed by it. But Zion had never been the type to let things go. At 18, he enlisted in the Navy, desperate to escape the city and prove himself on a battlefield where the rules were clear: kill or be killed. The military had given him discipline, purpose, and a way to channel his rage into something productive. Over the years, he had become one of the best, an elite SEAL trained in combat, intelligence, and survival. He had fought in places where death was a constant companion, where every decision meant life or oblivion. And yet, nothing had prepared him for the war he would face when he returned home. After nearly a decade of service, Zion had been forced out. Not dishonorably, but not by choice either. A classified mission had gone wrong, and someone had to take the fall. He had seen it coming, had known that the people pulling the strings would never let the truth come to light. So he had taken his severance pay, packed his bags, and returned to Ravenshore. At first, it had felt like stepping into a ghost town. The old neighborhood was still standing, but the faces were different. The corner store where he and his friends used to hang out was boarded up, replaced by a pawn shop that did more business in stolen goods than legitimate sales. The community center his father had fought to keep open was now a burned-out husk, graffiti covering the walls like scars. His mother still lived in the same house, though the years had worn her down. She had aged more than she should have, the weight of raising 2 children alone leaving lines of worry on her face. Imani had moved out, trying to make a life for herself in another city, but Zion could see the pain in his mother's eyes every time she mentioned her daughter. She had wanted more for both of them. Zion had tried to stay out of trouble, he really had, but trouble had a way of finding people like him. It started with a simple act: a late-night walk, an alleyway, a scream, a woman being dragged into the shadows by 2 men who thought no one was watching. Zion had never been the type to turn away. In seconds, he was on them, fists moving faster than their minds could process. A few broken bones later, the woman was safe, and the attackers were unconscious. It should have ended there, but then the cops arrived, and that was when everything went to hell. The flashing red and blue lights cut through the dark alley, bouncing off the wet pavement as the police cruisers skidded to a stop. Doors flew open. Officers poured out, guns drawn, barking orders before they even took in the scene. Hands where we can see 'em, on the ground now. Zion Mercer raised his hands slowly, his heart steady despite the chaos. The woman he had just saved stood a few feet behind him, trembling, her torn blouse evidence of what had nearly happened. The 2 men who had attacked her lay sprawled on the ground, moaning, barely conscious. Zion could have tried to explain. He could have pointed to the woman, told them to check the alley cameras, given them the full story. But he had grown up in Ravenshore. He knew how this worked. This wasn't about justice. This was about power. A tall, broad-shouldered officer stepped forward, his badge glinting under the streetlights. Lieutenant Damon Kessler. Zion had never met him before, but he recognized the type instantly. The kind of cop who enjoyed control, who thrived on bending the rules because he knew no one could stop him. Kessler looked Zion up and down, sneering. Well, what do we have here? Zion said nothing. Kessler turned to one of his officers. What do you think? Drug deal gone bad? Robbery? That ain't what happened, the woman blurted out, stepping forward. He saved me. Those men. Kessler silenced her with a look. Ma'am, why don't you let the professionals handle this? Zion clenched his jaw. He could feel it coming, the same routine played out 1,000 times in 1,000 cities. They already knew how this would go. And sure enough, the words came next. You're under arrest. Before he could react, the officers surged forward, twisting his arms behind his back, forcing him to his knees. The cold bite of steel snapped around his wrists. The woman shouted in protest. No, he didn't! Take her down to the station, Kessler ordered. We'll get her statement there. One of the officers grabbed her by the arm, leading her away as she struggled. Zion locked eyes with her for just a second before she was gone, and then a baton slammed into the side of his ribs. Just making sure you're compliant, Kessler said with a smirk. Zion tasted blood but didn't flinch. They had no idea who they were messing with. The station was cold, sterile, and reeked of sweat and bad coffee. Zion sat in the interrogation room, wrists still cuffed to the table, his posture relaxed despite the situation. He had been through worse. Kessler entered, tossing a folder onto the table with unnecessary force. You're in a lot of trouble, Mercer. Zion raised an eyebrow. That so? Kessler smirked, pacing like a predator. You assaulted 2 men tonight, left one with a fractured jaw, the other with a concussion. Both are claiming self-defense, and guess what? We got witnesses who back them up. Zion didn't react. He knew the game. Kessler had witnesses because Kessler controlled who got to be a witness. The door opened again and another man stepped inside, a lawyer, judging by the suit. But Zion recognized him immediately. A familiar face from the news. Senator Victor Langston, a politician, in an interrogation room at 2 a.m. That's when Zion knew this wasn't just about a corrupt cop trying to flex his power. This was bigger. Langston sat down, steepling his fingers. Mr. Mercer, or should I say former Petty Officer Mercer? Zion didn't reply. The senator smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You should have stayed gone, son. Ravenshore has changed since you left. People like you don't belong here anymore. Zion leaned forward, his chains rattling. People like me? Langston's smile widened. People who ask too many questions. And with that, Zion knew this wasn't just a bad arrest. This was a setup, and it went all the way to the top. Zion Mercer had spent years learning to control his instincts. In combat, hesitation could get you killed, but so could reckless aggression. He had trained himself to think first, act second. But sitting in that interrogation room, staring at Senator Victor Langston's smug expression, he felt a familiar fire rise in his chest. This wasn't about 2 street thugs anymore. This was about something much bigger. Langston drummed his fingers against the metal table, his expensive watch catching the dim light. You're probably wondering why I'm here. Zion didn't respond. Kessler chuckled from the corner. He's not much of a talker, Senator. Langston smirked. That's fine. I'll do the talking. He leaned in slightly. The way I see it, we've got 2 options here. 1, this incident tonight gets processed like any other assault case. The men you attacked. Zion cut him off. The men I stopped from attacking a woman. Langston ignored him. Are more than happy to press charges. And well, let's just say that in this city, the justice system doesn't always work in favor of people like you. Zion knew exactly what that meant. A black man with a history of violence, no matter how justified, was easy to paint as the aggressor. The media would eat it up. The courts would play along. He'd be convicted before he even stepped inside a courtroom. Langston adjusted his cufflinks. Option 2. He slid a crisp white envelope across the table. You walk away. Tonight never happened, but in return, you leave Ravenshore. For good. Zion stared at the envelope, then back at Langston. You think you can buy me out of my own city? Langston sighed as if he were explaining something to a child. I'm offering you a way out. You should take it. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. Zion leaned forward, his voice low and steady. I don't scare easy. Langston's smile didn't fade, but something in his eyes darkened. That's a shame. He stood, straightening his suit jacket. Lieutenant, book him. Kessler grinned. With pleasure. The senator left the room without another word, and within seconds, Kessler was on Zion, wrenching him up from the chair. "Hope you like concrete beds, Mercer." Zion remained silent, but his mind was racing. This wasn't just about some trumped-up charges. This was personal. Langston wanted him gone, and Zion needed to find out why. They processed him quickly. Mugshot, fingerprints, the whole routine. By the time they threw him into the holding cell, the place was nearly empty. Just a few drunks sleeping off the night and a man muttering to himself in the corner. Zion sat on the bench, stretching his wrists. His body still ached from the baton strike earlier, but he had dealt with worse. He wasn't worried about a night in lockup. What worried him was the bigger picture. Why had Langston gotten involved? What was so important that a U.S. senator had shown up personally to make a Navy SEAL disappear? The answer came sooner than he expected. Two officers entered the holding area, one of them tapping his baton against the bars. "Mercer, you've got a visitor." Zion frowned. It wasn't a lawyer, he hadn't called one, and his mother wouldn't even know he was here yet. That left only one possibility. Someone with an agenda. They led him down a dimly lit hallway to an interview room. Unlike the interrogation room from before, this one was smaller, quieter, and sitting on the other side of the table was a woman. She was in her mid-40s, sharp features, dark brown hair pulled into a tight bun. Her suit was professional but practical, the kind of outfit worn by someone who needed to blend in. Zion had seen enough intelligence operatives to recognize one when he saw one. The door shut behind him. The woman folded her hands on the table. "Zion Mercer." He sat down. "Depends who's asking." She smirked. "Agent Leah Vaughn, former FBI." "Former. That was interesting." Zion tilted his head. "Not many feds visit local jails in the middle of the night." "I'm not here as a fed," she replied. "I'm here because you're about to step into something dangerous. And if you don't start asking the right questions, you're going to end up just like your father." Zion's blood ran cold. His father. No one in power ever mentioned Darius Mercer. It was as if he had never existed. The fact that Leah Vaughn had just brought him up meant she knew more than she should. Zion leaned forward. "You've got my attention." She slid a folder across the table. "Then let's talk." Zion Mercer had learned from an early age that information was the most dangerous weapon in the world. Bullets could kill a man, but knowledge could destroy entire empires. And right now, Leah Vaughn was handing him a loaded gun. The folder sat between them on the cold metal table, untouched, yet heavy with unseen weight. Zion wasn't the type to jump at bait, especially not bait dangled so obviously in front of him, but when someone mentioned his father's name, he listened. His fingers tapped against the table. "You expect me to just open that and believe whatever's inside?" Leah smirked, but her eyes remained serious. "No, I expect you to open it, read it, and decide for yourself what to believe." Zion held her gaze for a moment before finally flipping open the folder. Inside were photos, documents, surveillance reports, a tangled mess of crime, politics, and police involvement, all with one common thread running through them. Senator Victor Langston. And buried deeper in the stack, another name Zion hadn't heard in years. Darius Mercer. Zion's father had been many things. A community leader, a Navy veteran, a man who had believed in justice so much that he had tried to fight the corruption rotting Ravenshore from the inside. And it had gotten him killed. Officially, Darius had died in a car accident. The brakes failed. A tragic malfunction. Zion had never believed that for a second. And now, staring at the documents in front of him, he finally had proof. One of the reports detailed a police cover-up, testimony from a former mechanic who had been paid off to tamper with the brakes, a list of officers involved in the aftermath, and at the very bottom, an approval signature that made Zion's stomach tighten. Lieutenant Damon Kessler. Zion exhaled slowly, controlling his anger. "You knew," he said, voice low. Leah's expression didn't change. "I suspected, for years, but I didn't have the full picture until recently." Zion shook his head, flipping through more pages. This doesn't just involve Kessler. There's city officials in here, judges, businessmen, and Langston. He's at the center of all of it. He wasn't always. Leah folded her arms. Your father was making progress. People were starting to listen to him. He was forming alliances, bringing in outside investigators. And then one night, his brakes failed. Zion clenched his jaw. He wasn't a kid anymore. He wouldn't let anger cloud his judgment. But right now, he was seeing red. Leah continued. After your father died, Langston stepped in, consolidated power, buried the investigations, bought off or silenced anyone who might have asked too many questions. She met his gaze. And now he wants you gone, because you're the one loose thread he can't control. Zion exhaled through his nose, forcing himself to think. If you've had this information, why haven't you done anything? Leah leaned forward slightly. Because information alone isn't enough, you know that. She nodded at the file. That's evidence, but what we need is exposure. Langston and Kessler don't just run this city, they own it. The justice system won't take them down, the police won't turn on their own, the media won't report a story they're paid not to touch. She let the words settle before adding, so we have to do it ourselves. Zion studied her carefully. We. Leah smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was the smile of someone who had been fighting for too long. You think I'd be here if I didn't need you? He didn't answer. She sighed, glancing at the clock. They'll be back soon. You have a choice to make. Zion closed the folder, his fingers tightening around the edges. He thought of his father, of the years he had spent trying to move on, trying to live a quiet life. But he had never been the type to walk away from a fight. His father had died trying to fix this city. Now it was Zion's turn. He met Leah's eyes. I'm in. Her smirk returned. Good. She slid another paper across the table. Then let's get you out of here. Zion Mercer had been in plenty of tight situations before. Being surrounded by insurgents in the Middle East, that was a tight situation. Navigating a classified Black Ops mission with no backup, that was a tight situation. Being trapped in a corrupt police station with a U.S. senator and a dirty lieutenant orchestrating his downfall, that was a whole different kind of hell. Leah Vaughn was his only real ally right now, and that wasn't exactly comforting. He didn't trust her, not yet, but she was right about one thing. He needed to get out of here. Zion eyed the paper she had slid across the table. A folded document, the ink still fresh. He picked it up, reading quickly. Court release order, he muttered, his brow furrowing. This is fake. Leah smirked. Obviously. Zion exhaled sharply. This won't work. They know I don't have a lawyer, and even if I did, Langston wouldn't let me walk out of here. Leah leaned back, tapping her nails against the table. That's why we're not going through the front door. Zion set the paper down, giving her a hard look. I'm listening. Leah glanced at the one-way mirror, lowering her voice. There's a maintenance exit in the basement. Leads straight to the alley behind the station. I have a car waiting. Zion narrowed his eyes. That's a hell of a coincidence. She smirked. I don't believe in coincidences. I planned this before I walked in here. That didn't sit well with him. He didn't like being someone else's pawn. But right now, his options were limited. Before he could respond, the door creaked open. Kessler. The lieutenant stepped inside, his usual smugness replaced with something colder, more calculating. His uniform was crisp, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The kind of man who took pride in his power. Zion didn't move. He was back in soldier mode now, steady breathing, slowed heart rate, analyzing every detail. Kessler closed the door behind him and leaned against it. Vaughn, he nodded at her with mock politeness. Didn't know you were back in town. Leah smiled thinly. I like to make unannounced visits. Kessler chuckled. I'm sure you do. His eyes flicked to Zion. You know, Mercer, I was hoping you'd be smarter than this. You had a good thing going. A clean record. Well, clean enough. But you just couldn't help yourself, could you? Zion stayed silent. He wasn't going to give Kessler the satisfaction of a response. Kessler took a step closer. You see, I don't need Langston's permission to deal with a problem like you. You put 2 of my guys in the hospital. That's enough justification for me to make sure you don't leave here in one piece. Leah crossed her arms. I'd reconsider that if I were you. Kessler turned to her. And why's that? Leah reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. With a casual flick of her thumb, she brought up a video. It was grainy, but the audio was crystal clear. A voice, Kessler's voice. I don't care if we have to kill him. Just make sure there's no evidence left behind. Kessler's jaw tightened. Leah smirked. You're not the only one with eyes on this city, Lieutenant. For the first time, Zion saw a flicker of uncertainty in Kessler's expression. Zion took the opportunity to stand, towering over the officer. "So here's how this is going to go," he said, his voice calm but laced with warning. "You're going to let us walk out of here. You're not going to ask any questions, and you're not going to try anything stupid." Kessler's fists clenched. "You think you scare me?" Zion leaned in slightly. "I don't think, Kessler, I know." The tension in the room was suffocating. Kessler was out of options. He couldn't risk Leah releasing the recording. Not yet, anyway. Finally, he exhaled sharply and stepped aside. "Fine, but this isn't over." Zion smirked. "It never is." Leah gave Kessler a mock salute before opening the door. Zion followed her out, his muscles still tight with anticipation. This wasn't a victory. It was just the first battle. And the war was only beginning. The hallway was eerily quiet as they moved. Zion had memorized the station's layout years ago, back when he had worked alongside some of these officers on community programs. He knew which corridors had security cameras, which doors were monitored. Leah led the way, her pace quick but controlled. "Basement stairs are ahead. Keep moving." They reached a set of metal doors at the end of the hallway. Leah pulled a keycard from her pocket, swiping it through the access panel. The lock clicked open. Zion arched an eyebrow. "You really came prepared." She shrugged. "I had a feeling you'd need rescuing." They slipped inside, descending the narrow stairwell. The air was musty, the walls lined with old pipes and electrical wiring. Halfway down, Leah suddenly stopped. She held up a hand. "Wait!" Zion froze. She pointed at the bottom of the stairs. A shadow moved just beyond the exit door. Someone was waiting. Zion inhaled deeply, mentally running through his options. He had no weapons, no armor, just his hands and years of training. Leah glanced at him. "We need a distraction." Zion smirked. "I've got one." Before she could ask what, he took a step back, then slammed his boot into the metal railing. The entire stairwell shook, the noise echoing through the basement. The guard outside reacted instantly, pushing the door open to investigate. That was his mistake. Zion moved fast, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting it hard. The gun clattered to the floor. Before the officer could react, Zion delivered a precise elbow to his jaw, knocking him unconscious. Leah exhaled. Zion picked up the fallen gun, checking the magazine. "Let's move." They slipped through the door into a dimly lit hallway. At the far end, a service exit loomed. Almost there. Then suddenly, a voice crackled over the station's intercom. "All units, we have a code red. Suspect Mercer is attempting escape. Lethal force is authorized." Leah cursed. "They're on to us." Zion tightened his grip on the gun. So much for a quiet exit. This just turned into a fight. The hallway felt like it was closing in. Every instinct in Zion Mercer's body screamed move, because when the alarm blared through the station, it wasn't just a warning. It was a death sentence. They weren't going to arrest him. They weren't going to let him walk out of here. They were going to kill him. Leah Vaughn was already moving, her heels barely making a sound against the concrete floor. Zion followed, the stolen pistol held low but ready. He wasn't looking for a fight, but if one came to him, he'd finish it. The service exit was only 20 feet away. The heavy steel door, the faint outline of the alley beyond, a taste of freedom just within reach. Then the first shot rang out. Crack! The bullet struck the concrete inches from Zion's foot, sending up a burst of dust. He barely had time to register the source before. Crack! Crack! More shots. Leah yelped, diving behind an old electrical box. Zion spun, pressing himself against the wall. His eyes flicked up, 2 officers, positioned at the top of the basement stairwell, weapons drawn. Kessler's men. Of course they wouldn't make this easy. "Mercer," one of the cops barked. "Put the gun down. Hands where I can see them." Zion's grip on the pistol tightened. He glanced at Leah. "You armed?" She gave him an annoyed look, pulling a compact handgun from inside her coat. "Obviously." Zion smirked. Crack! Another bullet slammed into the wall behind them. Zion didn't hesitate. He turned sharply, raising his weapon and squeezing the trigger. Pop, pop. The first shot forced one officer to duck. The second clipped the stairwell railing, sending sparks flying. It wasn't a kill shot. Zion didn't need it to be. He just needed time. Leah took the cue, firing twice toward the other cop. He cursed, retreating behind cover. Zion grabbed her wrist. Move. They sprinted 15 feet. 10, 5. Zion slammed into the door, throwing his shoulder against it. The metal groaned but didn't budge. Deadbolt. Damn it, he hissed. Leah was already pulling something from her pocket. A small, thin device, lockpick. She knelt, shoving it into the keyhole. Cover me. Zion turned, raising his gun. The officers had recovered, advancing down the stairwell. More gunfire. Zion fired back, forcing them to hesitate. A bullet grazed his sleeve, but he didn't flinch. The pain was distant, unimportant. Leah cursed under her breath, almost. Bang! The door burst open. They stumbled through, into the damp night air of the alleyway. But there was no time to celebrate. A police cruiser screeched to a halt at the alley's entrance, headlights flashing like a predator locking onto its prey. Zion barely had time to register it before the driver's side door flew open. And Damon Kessler stepped out. He wasn't in uniform, no badge, no pretense of authority, just a gun in his hand and a murderous gleam in his eyes. I told you, Kessler said, voice eerily calm. This wasn't over. Zion exhaled slowly, shifting his stance. His entire body was still in fight mode, every muscle coiled like a spring. Yeah, he muttered, I figured. Then he moved, lightning fast. Zion threw himself to the side just as Kessler fired. Bang! The bullet missed by inches, slamming into the brick wall. Zion rolled, snapping his own gun up and squeezing the trigger. Kessler ducked, diving behind his cruiser. Leah was already in motion, sprinting toward the car, waiting at the other end of the alley. Zion followed, gunfire ringing in his ears. He felt another bullet whip past his shoulder, hot and close. Then screeching tires. The getaway car lurched forward, its engine growling. The passenger door flew open. Zion didn't slow, didn't think. He just jumped. His body slammed into the seat, momentum carrying him forward. Leah tumbled in after him, slamming the door shut. The driver, a man Zion didn't recognize, hit the gas. Tires shrieked. The car launched forward, tearing down the alley at breakneck speed. Through the rear window, Zion saw Kessler standing there, watching them go. Not angry, not panicked, just smiling. Zion's stomach twisted. Something told him this wasn't a victory. This was just Kessler playing a longer game. The city blurred past as the getaway car sped through dimly lit streets, engine growling like a wounded beast. Zion Mercer's heart was still pounding from the gunfight, his breath coming fast and sharp. The air inside the car reeked of burnt gunpowder, sweat, and adrenaline. Leah Vaughn sat beside him, gripping the seat like she was still waiting for another bullet to rip through the car's frame. The driver, a middle-aged man with sharp features and a buzz cut, kept his eyes glued to the road, one hand on the wheel and the other gripping a pistol resting in his lap. Zion glanced over, scanning the man. He didn't recognize him. "Who the hell are you?" Zion demanded. "Name's Cole," the driver responded without looking away from the road. His voice was calm, too calm for someone who had just helped them escape a death trap. "Mutual friend sent me." Zion narrowed his eyes. "What mutual friend?" Cole let out a low chuckle. "The kind that doesn't want you dead just yet." Zion didn't like cryptic answers, but right now he had bigger problems. He turned back to the window, scanning the side streets for any signs of pursuit. They had shaken Kessler for now, but the bastard wouldn't let this go. No way. Zion had humiliated him, exposed his men, and made it clear that he wasn't going to roll over and die. Kessler was going to hit back, hard, and Zion wasn't sure how long he could keep dodging. Nowhere to run. The car weaved through an industrial district, rows of abandoned warehouses looming like the skeletons of a long-forgotten city. Zion could feel it now, that creeping sense of paranoia settling into his bones. They had nowhere to go. They couldn't go back to Leah's apartment. That was the first place Kessler would check. The police station was obviously out of the question. Safe houses, any known locations would already be compromised. "Where are we headed?" Leah finally spoke, her voice still steady despite the chaos they had just survived. Cole didn't answer immediately. Then, after a long pause, he said, "Somewhere off the grid." Zion hated how vague that was, but he had no choice. The car kept moving, taking sharp turns through winding back streets, the city growing darker and quieter. The deeper they went, the more Zion felt like they were slipping into the unknown. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Cole pulled into a secluded alley behind a rundown auto shop. The neon sign overhead flickered weakly, half the letters burned out. Hawk's Garage. Zion frowned. He had never heard of it. Cole killed the engine and turned to them. Get out. Zion hesitated, glancing at Leah, who looked just as wary. But they didn't have a choice. He stepped out, guns still in hand, scanning their surroundings. The street was empty. No cops, no tailing cars, just the sound of a distant siren somewhere in the city. Cole led them through a side door into the dimly lit garage. The air smelled of motor oil and rust, the concrete floor stained with years of grease and grime. A lone figure stood by a workbench, arms crossed. He was tall, older, with graying hair and a deep scar running along his jaw. Zion stiffened. He knew this man. Elias Carter, a former intelligence officer, a ghost, someone who had disappeared from the system years ago. Carter smirked. Long time, Mercer. Zion's jaw clenched. He had worked with Carter once, back when he was still in the Navy, back when he still believed in the system. What the hell is this? Zion asked. Carter leaned against the workbench, studying him. You've made some powerful enemies, kid. Zion scoffed. Yeah, no kidding. Carter's smirk faded. You don't get it, do you? Kessler isn't just some dirty cop. He's the tip of the iceberg. You're not just dealing with him. You're dealing with the people who keep him in power. Zion tensed. He had suspected it, but hearing Carter confirm it made his stomach turn. Leah folded her arms. So what, we're screwed? Is that what you're saying? Carter chuckled. Not necessarily, but you need to stop thinking like a soldier. His gaze locked onto Zion. You need to start thinking like a hunter. Zion exhaled slowly. And what's that supposed to mean? Carter's eyes gleamed. It means you don't run from the people trying to kill you. You turn the tables. Zion Mercer's fingers drummed against the cold metal of the workbench. The air inside Hawk's Garage was thick with oil, rust, and the faint, lingering smell of cigarette smoke. The dim overhead lights flickered slightly, casting long shadows over the scattered tools and half-dismantled vehicles. Elias Carter leaned back against an old tool chest, arms crossed, his piercing gaze locked onto Zion. The man had barely changed, same rugged, calculating stare, same unshaken confidence. But Zion wasn't the same man Carter had once known. He had spent years following orders, trusting the system. That system had turned its back on him. Now, Carter was telling him to stop running and start hunting. Zion exhaled sharply. You're saying Kessler's just a puppet? Carter nodded. And the real players? They're watching. The moment you stepped into that courtroom, the moment you exposed one of their own, they started tightening the noose. Zion clenched his jaw. Then let's cut the damn rope. Leah Vaughn let out a quiet breath beside him. You make it sound easy. Carter chuckled. It's not. But you don't fight a war head-on, Mercer. You dismantle it piece by piece. Kessler's just a lieutenant in their operation. If we want to bring the whole damn house down, we need leverage. Zion frowned. Leverage? Carter pushed off the tool chest and walked over to a metal filing cabinet in the corner. With a loud clank, he yanked open a drawer and pulled out a thick folder, tossing it onto the workbench. Meet Senator Victor Langston. Zion flipped open the file. Inside were grainy photos, financial records, and reports detailing Langston's connections to Kessler, and something even bigger, an underground operation laundering money through police contracts, real estate deals, and Black Vipers, the criminal syndicate tied to Kessler's network. Leah's eyes scanned the documents, her brow furrowing. Langston is clean on paper, but this is enough to bury him. Carter nodded. If we can make this public, we don't just take down Kessler, we take down the whole damn empire. Zion tapped the file. So what's stopping us? Carter gave him a pointed look. Proof? This? He gestured to the folder. This is circumstantial. It's not enough to bring him down. We need something ironclad. Something that forces even the most corrupt players to throw him under the bus. Zion's mind was already racing. Kessler's their enforcer. If he's protecting Langston, then he's got something. Records, transactions, something tying them together. Carter smirked. Now you're thinking like a hunter. Setting the trap, Zion took a slow breath. Kessler won't give us the evidence willingly. Leah's expression hardened. Then we take it from him. Carter folded his arms. You've got a plan? Zion glanced at the security monitors near the garage's entrance, mind working through the possibilities. We can't hit Kessler head on. He's got too many men, too much protection. But if we can make him desperate, We can force him to make a mistake. Carter grinned. And how do we do that? Zion's eyes darkened. We make him think he's the one being hunted. Leah tilted her head. You want to shake him up? Not just shake him. Zion's voice was steady, ice cold. I want to break him. Carter chuckled. All right, Mercer, let's hear it. Zion leaned over the workbench, tracing a rough outline of Kessler's territory across the city. Kessler thrives on control. He needs to feel like he's the one pulling the strings. If we start dismantling his operation, cutting off his resources, taking his people out of the picture, he'll panic. And when he panics, he'll make mistakes. Leah smirked. Carter nodded. So where do we start? Zion's eyes flickered toward the file on Langston. We start with the money. The first strike. An hour later, Zion, Leah, and Carter sat inside a stolen SUV parked across from a sleek, glass-walled high-rise in downtown. The building housed a private security firm, one of Kessler's laundering fronts. It was almost midnight. The city outside pulsed with neon lights, the streets still alive with distant traffic and pedestrians. But here, in this darkened part of town, the building stood like an impenetrable fortress. Zion adjusted the earpiece in his ear. Cameras? Leah tapped on a small tablet, hacking into the building's external feeds. Blacked out the outer security grid. We've got 5 minutes before they realize something's wrong. Carter checked his weapon. Then let's not waste time. Zion pulled on a black tactical jacket, checking his pistol one last time. We go in silent. No bodies unless necessary. We get the financial records and get out. Leah smirked. Sounds easy enough. Carter snorted. It never is. The three of them moved quickly, slipping through a side entrance that Leah had unlocked remotely. The lobby was empty, a sterile white space filled with glass partitions and polished floors. Security cameras blinked overhead, but they were already disabled. They moved fast, taking the stairwell instead of the elevator. 4th floor, accounting department, that was their target. As they reached the landing, Zion held up a hand. Movement. Leah and Carter froze. Footsteps, 2 security guards, armed, chatting quietly as they walked past the hallway ahead. Zion exhaled. Timing was everything. The moment the guards turned the corner, Zion moved. Silent, precise. He grabbed the first guard from behind, arm locking around his throat, cutting off his air before he could react. The second guard barely had time to register what was happening before Leah struck, a swift, brutal takedown that sent him crashing to the floor. Neither man made a sound. Carter stepped over their unconscious bodies. Nice work. Zion ignored the praise, motioning for them to move. They reached the main office, a large glass-walled room with a secured server unit in the center. Leah immediately went to work, connecting her tablet to the system. Give me a sec, she muttered, fingers flying over the screen. Zion kept his eyes on the hallway, gun raised. Hurry. Leah smirked. Relax. The lights went red. A loud alarm blared through the building. Carter cursed. They know we're here. Leah's face went pale. Damn it, Kessler must have upgraded the system. We've got... Boom! The door behind them exploded inward. Armed men flooded into the office, Kessler's elite unit. Zion barely had time to react before the first shot rang out. The ambush had begun. The explosion tore through the glass partitions, sending shards flying across the room like 1,000 tiny blades. The concussive force knocked Leah off balance, her tablet clattering to the floor as smoke and dust filled the air. Zion barely had time to react before the first gunshot rang out, the bullet missing his head by inches as he dove behind a desk. Contact! Carter shouted, already returning fire. The elite unit stormed the office, clad in black tactical gear, their visors reflecting the emergency lights flashing across the ceiling. They moved with brutal efficiency, trained professionals, not street thugs. These weren't just security. They were Kessler's personal enforcers. Leah grabbed her sidearm and fired, hitting one of the attackers in the shoulder, sending him crashing into a filing cabinet. Carter landed a headshot on another, dropping him instantly. Zion rolled across the floor, grabbing his suppressed pistol from his holster. His mind was razor-sharp, instincts honed from years of special ops. He had been in worse situations, but this was close. Another attacker lunged through the smoke, wielding a combat knife. Zion barely had time to react before the blade slashed toward his throat. He dodged, twisting his body, feeling the cold steel graze his jacket. In an instant, he countered, disarming the man with a brutal strike to the wrist, flipping the knife and driving it deep into the attacker's side. The man choked in pain before collapsing. Leah kicked over a desk, taking cover. "We've got to move!" Carter emptied his magazine, taking out 2 more enemies before ducking behind a server rack. "We're pinned down. They're blocking every exit." Zion's mind raced. This wasn't just a response team, this was an execution squad. Kessler had been expecting them. And that meant one thing. They had a mole. The escaped Zion scanned the room, searching for an escape route. The only way out was the way they came in, but the hallway was compromised. More enemies were pouring in, cutting off their exit. Then he saw it, the window. "We're going out the side!" he shouted, motioning to the floor-to-ceiling glass wall that overlooked the alley below. Leah hesitated. "We're on the 4th floor, Zion." Carter grinned. "That's what makes it fun." Zion grabbed a chair, spun around, and hurled it at the window. The glass shattered outward, fragments raining down onto the pavement below. Cold night air rushed in, carrying the distant sounds of sirens in the city. The gunfire behind them intensified. "We go now," Zion ordered. Carter went first, sprinting full speed before launching himself through the open window. He tucked his body midair, landing hard onto the fire escape below. The metal groaned under the impact, but it held. Leah took a deep breath. "Screw it!" She ran, leaped, and landed beside Carter, rolling to absorb the impact. Zion was next. He turned, fired 3 precise shots, hitting an attacker's center mass, then ran full speed toward the window. The moment his foot hit the frame, he launched himself outward, twisting in midair before slamming onto the fire escape. He barely had time to recover before the door behind them burst open. "They're coming!" Leah yelled. Zion didn't hesitate. "Go move!" They sprinted down the metal stairs, boots clanging loudly against the steel. The alley was narrow, shadowed by towering buildings, with a black SUV waiting at the end, Carter's getaway vehicle. They were halfway down when gunfire erupted from above. "Sniper!" Carter roared. A red laser sight swept across the alley, locking onto Leah. Zion tackled her, both of them crashing onto the lower landing as a high-caliber round tore through the metal where she had been standing a second before. "That was close," she muttered, breathing heavily. Zion pulled her up. "No time for close calls. Keep moving." They reached the bottom, sprinting for the SUV. Carter yanked the door open, diving into the driver's seat. Leah slid into the passenger side, Zion jumping into the back. "Drive, drive, drive," Leah shouted. Carter slammed the gas pedal. The tires screeched, the vehicle lurching forward as the alley blurred past. Above them, the sniper repositioned. Another shot rang out, hitting the side mirror, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. Carter cursed. "Damn, these guys aren't playing around." Zion rolled down the window, aiming upward. He spotted the glint of the sniper's scope on the rooftop above. Without hesitation, he fired 3 precise shots. The sniper's body jerked backward, and he disappeared from view. "Got him!" Zion reloaded. "Now get us out of here." Carter didn't need to be told twice. He swerved onto the main road, blending into the late-night traffic, speeding past neon-lit billboards and blinking traffic signals. They had survived, but Zion knew this wasn't a victory. It was only the beginning. The fallout inside a dimly lit penthouse suite across the city. Kessler stood motionless, watching the security footage from the failed ambush. His jaw tightened, fingers curling into a fist. The attack had been supposed to be a guaranteed kill. Yet somehow Zion Mercer had escaped. Behind him, a shadowy figure stepped forward, Senator Victor Langston. He adjusted the cuff of his suit, his expression unreadable. "This is disappointing, Kessler," Langston said quietly. Kessler exhaled slowly. "They were more prepared than we anticipated." Langston turned, his gaze cold. "No, you underestimated him." Kessler clenched his jaw. "It won't happen again." Langston studied him for a long moment, then finally spoke. "No, it won't." He walked toward the window, looking out over the city skyline. "Mercer has declared war on us. He's not just trying to survive, he's trying to dismantle everything we've built." Kessler stepped forward. "Then we strike first." Langston smirked. "Exactly." He turned back to Kessler, his expression dark. "Kill him. Kill everyone he cares about, and make sure the next time he runs, there's nowhere left to hide." Zion Mercer had been in enough covert operations to know when he was being hunted. After the ambush at Kessler's office, the city had turned against him. Every alleyway, every street corner, every shadow felt like a potential death trap. He, Leah, and Carter had gone underground, rotating between safe houses, relying on burner phones, and staying off the grid as much as possible. But it wasn't enough. Langston and Kessler weren't just after them, they were erasing every connection Zion had. A former Navy contact, executed in his apartment, an old informant in the police force, found suicide in his car, a hacker friend who once helped Zion track financial movements, vanished without a trace. The message was clear: run and they'll hunt you, fight and they'll crush you. Zion knew they couldn't keep running forever. He had spent his whole life fighting in the shadows, but now it was time to bring the fight into the light. But first, he needed a way in, and that's when the bait arrived. Carter was monitoring police scanners when the signal came through, a dispatch about a VIP prisoner transfer. Zion barely reacted at first. There were dozens of high-profile arrests happening in the city lately, especially with all the dirt Leah had been leaking to the press. But then the name came through. Suspect identified as Olivia Mercer. Repeat, VIP prisoner Olivia Mercer. Zion's world stopped. His mother, the woman who had spent her entire life keeping him out of trouble. The one person who had never asked him for anything except to stay safe. And now she was in police custody because of him. They got her, Leah whispered, reading Zion's expression before he even spoke. Zion exhaled sharply, his hands curling into fists. Where are they taking her? Carter pulled up a digital map. They're moving her from a temporary holding facility downtown to a secure black site. That's federal custody, not city police. That means Kessler's behind it, Zion finished, his voice tight. They're using her to draw me out. Leah's expression darkened. If we go after that convoy, we're walking right into a trap. Zion's gaze didn't waver. Then we'll just have to turn the trap on them. The convoy was scheduled to move in 3 hours. They had one chance to hit it. Carter hacked into the city's traffic control systems, rerouting key intersections to stall police response time. Leah scouted the transfer route, identifying weak points where an ambush could work. Zion armed himself, not just with weapons, but with a plan. They weren't just going to extract his mother. They were going to send a message, one that said, "You came for my family, now I'm coming for you." At midnight, the convoy rolled out, 4 armored SUVs, flanked by 6 police motorcycles. The streets were eerily empty, cleared in advance for the high-priority transfer. Inside the second SUV, Olivia Mercer sat with her hands cuffed, her face calm despite the circumstances. She wasn't scared, because she knew her son would come for her. The lead vehicle radioed in. Unit 1 to command, proceeding as scheduled, no signs of hostiles. But Langston and Kessler weren't leaving anything to chance. Watching the convoy from a remote control room, Kessler gave the order. Deploy the countermeasures. If Mercer shows up, end him. Zion's team struck fast and hard. At a key intersection, a garbage truck, previously hijacked by Carter, barreled into the street, smashing through a police barricade and cutting off the convoy's lead vehicle. The first SUV swerved violently, its driver slamming the brakes, but it was too late. A remote explosive hidden in a nearby manhole detonated, sending the vehicle flipping through the air in a ball of fire. The convoy exploded into chaos. Police motorcycles skidded out, officers scrambling for cover. Leah, already positioned on a rooftop, fired a precise sniper shot, taking out the rear SUV's tire, sending it crashing into a lamppost. Now only one vehicle stood between Zion and his mother. Zion emerged from the shadows, moving with military precision. He fired 2 shots, hitting the armored windshield of the remaining SUV, not to penetrate, but to disorient. As the driver flinched, Carter, driving a repurposed SWAT truck, T-boned the SUV from the side, sending it skidding across the pavement. Before the dazed officers inside could react, Zion ripped the door open. 2 guards raised their weapons, but he was faster. 1 headshot, another shot to the kneecap, and just like that he was in. "Mom," he breathed, stepping into the vehicle. Olivia Mercer looked up at him, unshaken. "Took you long enough." Zion sliced her cuffs with his combat knife. "Let's go." But as they stepped out, Leah's voice crackled over the comms. "Zion!" The moment Zion turned, he saw them. A second wave of enforcers. Not cops, private mercenaries. And leading them, Kessler himself. Standing atop a nearby police vehicle dressed in a black tactical vest, Kessler smirked down at Zion, completely unfazed. "You actually showed up," he said, shaking his head in mock disappointment. "Predictable." Zion tensed, positioning himself in front of Olivia. "You made this about my family. That was a mistake." Kessler chuckled. "No, Mercer. The mistake was thinking you ever had a choice in how this ends." He raised his hand, and all hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted. Leah took cover, picking off mercenaries from a distance. Carter floored the SWAT truck, ramming into an enemy SUV to create an opening. Zion grabbed Olivia, shielding her behind a flipped car while returning fire with lethal precision. But this time, it wasn't just about survival. This was war. Zion knew that if he let Kessler escape tonight, they would never stop hunting them. This had to end here. One final move. He looked at Leah, gave her the signal, and with that, she fired a single, precise shot, not at a person, but at a hidden detonator Zion had planted earlier in the chaos. The explosion ripped through the street. Kessler's men were scattered, thrown into disarray. Zion took the opportunity, rushing through the smoke, heading straight for Kessler. It was time to finish this. The explosion rocked the street, sending debris and smoke billowing into the air. The sharp scent of burning rubber and gasoline mixed with the metallic tang of blood. Car alarms wailed, sirens screamed in the distance, and the flickering glow of the fires cast long, jagged shadows over the battlefield. Zion didn't stop. Through the chaos, he locked eyes with Kessler, the man who had orchestrated this nightmare, the man who had made this personal. Kessler staggered from the blast, his black tactical vest smeared with soot and dirt. But he wasn't out of the fight yet. Around him, his mercenaries regrouped, forming a defensive line as the smoke began to clear. Zion grabbed his mother's arm, guiding her toward Carter. "Get her out of here," he ordered, his voice sharp. "Not without you," Olivia protested. "Go, Mom," Zion insisted, his gaze flicked to Carter. "Take her to the backup rendezvous point. Do not stop, no matter what." Carter hesitated for a split second, then nodded. "I got her." Leah's voice crackled over the comms. "Zion, you're outnumbered. You need to move. Now." But he wasn't listening. Zion advanced. A mercenary lunged at him, raising his rifle, but Zion was faster. He ducked under the barrel, driving a brutal elbow into the man's ribs before flipping him over his shoulder. Before the merc could recover, Zion put 2 rounds in his chest. Another enemy fired from behind. Zion twisted, yanking the first merc's body into the line of fire. The bullets slammed into the corpse, giving Zion just enough time to roll forward and snap off a precise shot, dropping the shooter. 4 more enemies left. Kessler grinned, stepping back as his remaining men fanned out. "You're good, Mercer," he called over the gunfire. "But even you can't win this alone." Zion didn't answer. He was already moving. A mercenary swung at him with a combat knife. A mistake. Zion caught the man's wrist mid-strike, twisted hard enough to snap bone, then plunged the same knife into his throat. 3 left. The next opponent rushed him. Zion sidestepped, using the momentum to slam the merc's head into a burning car. The flames caught his uniform, and he screamed, flailing wildly as he collapsed. 2. The last 2 mercenaries opened fire, forcing Zion into cover. He darted behind an overturned SUV, feeling the bullets shredding metal just inches from him. Silence. They were reloading. Zion lunged over the hood of the SUV, bringing his pistol up. 2 shots, 2 kills. And then it was just him and Kessler. Kessler clapped slowly, smirking. "Well played, Mercer. I was hoping we could settle this like professionals, but you just had to make it personal." Zion's grip on his pistol tightened. "You made it personal when you came after my family." Kessler chuckled. "And yet here we are, you standing in the middle of the street, bleeding, exhausted. And me?" He gestured around them. "Still standing, still in control." Zion's jaw clenched. Kessler took a step closer. "You think this ends tonight?" His voice was quiet now, almost amused. "Even if you kill me, Mercer, you won't stop this. There's always someone else, someone richer, more powerful." He tilted his head. "Face it, you're not fighting just me. You're fighting an entire system." Zion's heart pounded, but his hand was steady as he raised his gun. "Then I'll burn the whole system down." Kessler moved first. He reached for the pistol at his hip, but Zion was ready. Bang! The bullet hit dead center, a perfect shot to the heart. Kessler staggered, his eyes widening in disbelief as he clutched his chest. Blood seeped through his fingers, dark and slick. For a moment it looked like he might say something. A last threat, a final curse. But then he crumpled, and just like that, it was over. The city was in shambles. The corruption that had festered for so long had finally been exposed. Leah's leaks had gone viral, Carter's intel had been handed to the press, and Zion's war had left a trail of bodies in the streets. Langston had disappeared, his political career in flames. The police force was being overhauled, with federal investigators pouring into the city. And Zion Mercer, he didn't run anymore. He stood, because there would always be another battle. And he would be ready.